Okay, I found it. His name is the leader, David Berg, and he founded the cult in 1968, and he claimed to be a prophet. Big surprise. And he wrote all these letters called Mo letters, which he basically outed himself is what he did. He like, it's like such an idiot. He huge following, as idiotic as he was. He died in hiding in 1994. I don't know if he ever was held on charges of the things he did, which was rampant pedophilia, incest, mind control, and oh god, they did this thing where they would call it flirty fishing, which was using sex for recruitment, especially the women and, most unfortunately, some of the children, closer to teenage years. But in private, back at the commune, it's so gross I can barely talk about it. They would start exploiting these children as young as 4. So River Phoenix started being sexually exploited at age 4. And so, then they didn't run away from the cult till he was 7. So that's quite a lot of time. And this guy, David Berg, he would say it was, he had a whole ridiculous theory about, because all these leaders always have these huge spiritual explanations for everything manipulative and coercive and disgusting that they're doing. But his was that children were supposed to be in intimate contact with adults within their family, because it was a manifestation of God's relationship with man. Like, it was to teach children the love of God. But of course, the children were separated from their parents during these experiences, and there were cameras involved. So it's like, complete. Obviously, everybody knows what that all means. Complete exploitation. And the mother of the Phoenix kids, which that wasn't their name, their last name was Bottom, so they changed their name when they left the cult. And then they went to LA, and because their children had been performing in the streets, especially in South America, for years, and they were really talented, and everybody would gather, and they would get huge audiences and stuff. So they decided to, the 2 boys, they started having them audition for roles, in Hollywood. And River became famous almost instantaneously. And he died, and probably most people know this, in the Viper Room, which was a popular club in LA. He OD'd on drugs. And he also had an epileptic fit. Which is interesting, because one of his, I think the best role he ever did was in a movie called My Private Idaho. And his character had narcolepsy. And he was always having these episodes in that movie where he would just pass out and almost have like a, visceral reaction physically. All right, so let's go back to the cult. So the mom did not know she trusted them. She didn't realize what was going on for years. When she finally started to put it together, they left all their belongings and just ran off in the middle of the night. Her husband and the kids. And that's when they changed their names. And like I said, when they got to LA, they had contacts through the cult. And that's how they were able to get the favor to get auditions, etc., etc. And they tried to start their lives over. But the point is, not the point, but it's not to be. I noticed that these kids had been living in foreign countries, homeschooled, no television, not like that's good for kids, but they had been living vagabond lifestyles, basically just going wherever they were sent to promote children of God and to recruit and raise money. So they basically had been living the just the kind of lifestyle that's like not at all typical to what most kids would be able to do, which have stability or have even if their home is has addiction or toxic relationships or whatever, at least most people tend to not be living constantly moving, constantly never knowing where they're going, constantly being loyal to this sort of supposedly rule-based closed society. But honestly, this guy was such a fruitcake who ran it that he had them just doing all kinds of loopy stuff all the time. Because that's what these cult leaders do. It's usually always some kind of charismatic, manipulative, possibly personality disorder type leader who is highly skilled at what he does, which is be someone who can affect the lives of many just by their personality, just by their charisma, just by their aura, just by all this spiritual knowledge that they've just regurgitate and spit out, which is just, if you look up half this shit, it's anybody can take a bunch of philosophy and religious wording and, if you're, you have some kind of skill at that kind of thing, of taking information and reformatting it to whatever you need to do to be successful in what your endeavors. That's basically all he did. And then as he grew, this, and this happens a lot where cults will start in America and then they'll start to get in hot water in America, because they're always doing shit. And then they'll go to Europe and then start branches of their community abroad. where they can get away with more shit, right? Because they're in countries where they have the leverage of being white foreigners, whatever, and they can do all their malarkey over there. And then, they usually try to come back to America. As soon as they can get back, they do. But it's actually a deterrent to many countries about, how many cults are, move over to other countries. Because they don't bring anything to those countries because they're all grifters and con artists, and they just exploit everybody, in the country for their own profit. So it's like they're not an asset in any way, but this is something that happens. It's not just this cult, it's multiple cults do this. And there are many kinds of cults. I was going to talk about that. There's religious cults, there's doomsday cults. Basically, you can have a cult based on anything. You can have a cult based on liking horses or anything. And a cult doesn't have to be thousands of people. It could just be a small family cult. And the difference between a religious organization and a cult is basically organized religion recognizes God or whatever they're calling their power greater than themselves. All the money, focus, praise, whatever you want to call it, will be focused on whatever deity they're choosing, right? And then the abstract philosophy of that religion, right? All the different things that make that religion unique in itself, right? But a cult, instead of they're supposed to be children of God, supposed to be a charity that raises money for the people who are doing God's work, right? But that's not what happens. They're basically they're just pimping out the women of that community, basically, to bring money back to the leader, and then he can use that to boost his fame and and just keep growing himself because most of these cult leaders, they think that they are actually maybe not God, but a representative of God. They think that they are prophets. They're prophets, right? And so they see they don't see any of the money coming back to them as being exploitive. They see it as God's work, and that they're the hand of God, right? So that's the difference. So instead of the focus being on whatever the cult's supposed to be about, the focus is usually on the upper hierarchy of the cult. So that would be the leader, and then whoever he has as his right hand or whatever. And they usually always have preferred favorites who they work with to keep this all going. But it's always secretive, and what's really going on, nobody really knows. But the whole thing is totalitarian government structure, or it's an absolute structure of they it's very elitist. It's like basically like whoever's running the cult, of course they don't call it a cult, but I mean, honestly, like traditional Christians think like Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons are cults. You know what I mean? Like the word cult can be abused in of itself. But how, like most people don't go join a cult. Like basically what happens is there's people who are disenfranchised, they're disappointed in society, they don't want to be part of, the typical 9 to 5 culture, or there's some big event has happened, that, like, for example, the Vietnam War, that spurred, like, in the early 70s and late 60s, many cults grew out of that frustration, because there were draft dodgers, there were people who wanted, counterculture. They wanted something to believe in that wasn't what they were being offered. They wanted an alternative, and so that's where cult leaders, perfect. Perfect. What do I want to say? Like it's a perfect formula for them to come in and tell you what you need and want, and they give you structure. They give you a cohesive community. To people who feel disenfranchised and separated, and they feel like they've lost their community or their country or whatever, it's like, what I'm saying is, like, these cult leaders, they take advantage of political events or even natural disasters, or like whatever's going on socially. Like that's just fodder for them to do what they need to do. And what's perceived of occult leaders, that maybe they're very dominant and forceful and like brainwash people into being robots. That's not really what goes on. It's more like a soft sell. Like they're like a smiling big brother, where it's like they just are very appealing and very all their ideas and plans, the way they I can't even say that word. The way they sell their ideology, it's more like a friendly, like it's more like a, absent-minded professor, or, powerful magnetic speaker, that kind of thing. Like they're not coming in as an authority figure per se. They're more like a mentor or somebody to be a hero of that community. Like somebody that seems to have, like, what a cult wants you to think is that they have knowledge or secrets to a better life. They have a new way, or they're going to teach you the old ways that you don't understand because you're not spiritually, intelligent enough to know what they know. And, like they always do this elitist thing where it's like they have the answers, you have the questions, and once you two get together, or you and your family or whatever, like it's all going to make sense. It's all going to create this new world, this light that hasn't existed before is going to, beam upon people and show them the way to the, and they use all the same stuff that everybody's, has been saying since the dawn of time in all religion. Like they use all the same metaphors, symbols. It's like, it's not rocket science. Like none of these people are ever doing much that hasn't been done before. They're just extremely good at repackaging it and making it desirable to the people at that time and what the people at that time are looking for. And it's not like there's always this false idea that people who join cults are like easily taken advantage of, or they're just like not very smart, or like they're easily duped, or but there's been like insane amounts of research done by multiple institutions, etc. And most of the people who join cults are like middle class. They're usually educated. A lot of times it used to be youth cults. It used to be like a whole lot more just young men, women who were looking for answers, or they were rebelling against the status quo, and they would just get sucked up by these groups because they, like I said, they had what they were looking for, which was a solid community where maybe had looser morals, or what, like there was more pleasure to be gotten, like whatever way they were living, maybe they're going to exciting places, traveling, like all the kinds of things that you don't get from like a 9-to-5, lifestyle of being in the rat race, right? So what they also do is they sort of have this double set of ethics, like the cult leaders and whoever they get to draw you in. And what I mean by that is that, like, on one hand, they're trying to sell you this new lifestyle that's going to be enriching. So it's like they're supposed to be bringing you this special lifestyle that's going to free your mind and free you from whatever you feel unsatisfied and disenfranchised from, right? They're going to be the opposite of that. They're going to come in and fill all those gaps. Well, while they're doing that, they're also taking away all your individuality, and you're basically signing over your decision-making ability or any morals you had or common sense you had. Like, basically you're giving them everything physically, emotionally, mentally, sexually, I said mentally, emotionally, materialistically. Like, you have to turn over everything. And what they tend to do is remove you from prior friends, family, job situations. They usually tell you have to give up everything to start your new life with them, right? And so they take you away, they have you leave, and you have to usually go somewhere physically, somewhere else with them that's more remote or a closed off area where, and the communications, they always do this isolation thing where it's like, you can never call, write, visit any of these people, right? Once they're sucked into these cults, they're just untouchable. They're not there anymore for you to find. They're somewhere, but nobody quite knows where. It's like when people, they're masters at promising you more communication, in that you're going to be with a community that understands you and loves you, and they're going to be your family, while they're simultaneously promising that and pretending that that's what they're giving you. They're also stripping you of your basic rights as a human being, right? And to the point where they break you down, they tear down who you are, and then they rebuild you into groupthink, or like whatever their principles of that cult is. Like, you have to show them complete loyalty, and then they break you and rebuild you, and then it's like, maybe during that process you're like, like, hey, wait a minute, I don't like how I would be if I had to join the military and it made me get up at like 4 a.m. to like go run 30 miles. I'd be like, what the fuck am I doing here? No, I don't like this. It's like this is not for me. But guess what? You can't go back to your family, friends, because you left everybody, like you sold all your property. You probably got rid of your house, your car, like, who is it that you're going to, and this is, before cell phones and all that stuff, but it's like, who are you going to contact, right? Like, you told everybody off, you're like, off to your new life. You know what I mean? Like, they make it in this way where it's like, you become dependent on them, even when you get to the point where you don't want to be there anymore. Like, now you can't leave. It's not like a gang or something, but it's like, you can't leave because they demoralized you and made you so insecure. You question everything about you. You don't feel autonomous. You don't feel like you could start over. They really drill that into you that, you are the group. You're whatever you've become, that is who you are, essentially. Like, the past is, that person. Like, they've done everything they can to eradicate that. And then, your job is to surrender and obey. And that's why they have a I can't say it. Also, the authoritarian structure. Yes. And, they've convinced you that society's against you. Society is their stupid sheep. They just follow anything that the family that you would join is the enlightened ones, and the ones who are smarter, know what's really going on, have the secrets of the universe, all this kind of thing. So the leaders are, of course, charismatic. They demand, like I said, loyalty, excessive devotion, and then also they sexually exploit you, most times. And then when they do that, then of course there's shame and guilt, and like, if there's drugs, I think at this particular cult there was like a lot of LSD, and I can't remember all the drugs, but there was plenty of drugs. And obviously they had like open sexually for the group, and then whatever they were doing with minors. And so they also want you to be, it's so weird. It's like they want you to be open to all their odd requests, but at the same time, they're not open to you. Like, whatever personal feelings you have about everything, it's like they sort of put the fear of God literally into you. So if you talk against them, then you're against the family, then you're against, and like I said, you might be in other countries, you don't even speak the language, or you're picking up the language. Like, I mean, they put you in these vulnerable situations, cut off with no communication, and you form these really tight bonds with these people because you guys are the only ones doing this weird ass shit, right? So who else are you going to talk to? And so that makes it even harder for you to get away, because frankly, the weird shit that goes on in these cults, it's like, who's going to believe you when you leave? Like, it's just like, or if they do believe you, they're going to think you're crazy to have been a sucker to do all this stuff, and they don't just make people into blind robots, they reprogram them and brainwash them, but it's not the kind of brainwashing where they're just like have no feelings. It's not. It's because most of these groups are very like touchy feely, like in every sense, like even like all their spiritual mumbo jumbo and their physical whatever. They're just. It's like an oversaturation of all your senses. It's like I think the best way to describe it is there was a woman who's done tons of research on these, and she was in a cult for 10 years, I believe it is. And she kind of said it best, where she said she interviewed this one guy who was a cult leader, and she has a whole book. I think it's called The Myth of Cults or something. And she had a great point. Like, she interviewed this leader. I mean, he wasn't a leader anymore. The whole thing had been disbanded. But he told her how he himself, the leader, the one who's doing all this, confessed to her that he was actually shocked that all these young men and women who seemed like they were rebelling against society, and they had very like bold, brash ideas and strong temperaments, because they're not fitting in, right? They're very strong people. But when it came to after he did all this cohesive control and love bombing and brainwashing, once all that stuff was done to them, and he said he was shocked at how they just did whatever he wanted, and he was actually amazed. And so he said sometimes he would just say random stuff and see if they would do it, and they did. Like, the whole personality that they came in with, all that energy and power, because they could have overpowered. He was older than them, you know what I mean? And there's more of them, but it's like, it didn't go that way. It was like he could get them to do whatever he wanted. And I think it goes back to that. There's some psychological theory, I can't remember the exact name of it, but basically it's like, I've talked about this in my other videos, where once you decide to do something and you're all in, like, I know this from my own intergenerational trauma, like I made a horrible mistake when I was 14, one of the worst mistakes in my entire life, and I got involved with a much older man because I wanted to get married and get away from my schizophrenic mother, right? So, and he was controlling, and there was a lot of sexual abuse, and it was, domestic violence. It was a horrific situation that went on for like 3 years. Anyway, why am I bringing that up? Because I felt like once I had started to go down that path, and it all ended up, it was a fiasco. It all blew up in my face. Like, we did not get married. Like, I didn't even know the laws in the state I was in of like how old, you have to be. And I ended up being stuck, still seeing my mom on visitation, like on a regular basis, and, being abused physically and psychologically, pummeled as I go into it in my other videos. I'm not going to get into it now, but I mean, like, just destroyed on every level, while I was also being destroyed by this man that I chose to get me away from her. So it's like, but it's like, what happened to me anyway, and that's why I can relate to this, is like, I got to that point where I was like, well, I've already screwed up. I already made all the worst decisions. I have to go with it now. I've already, like, why would I stop? I mean, like, because you still think, well, maybe whatever I originally wanted will still happen. And then when you realize it's not going to happen, and you're just getting all bad experiences, and there's not going to be any good return on any of it, you've just ruined your life for nothing. Then it's like, what you should do at that moment, which I hope that I've gotten older and wiser, and now I know, is like, you get out, you cut your losses, it's just like, okay, well, I just wasted all that time and I wasted my life, and I guess I got taken advantage of by everybody, by my own doing, my own voluntary doing. But I was, at that time, I was, underage, but that's another story. But my point is that now I know that when that shit happens and like you made the wrong choice and you just kept going with it, it's like you just need to forget getting anything out of it. Like, forget any return. Just leave and stop the clock. That's the best thing you can do. Don't look back. Because what I did then is I just was like, well, I've already given up, I already gave up my virginity. I already gave up, having any respect for myself because I'm letting this person beat me. Like, I've already so it was just like, what am I going to have just done all that and there's not going to be any like turnaround, like just ruin my own life? So that what's happening? And the answer is yes, that's what you did. Like, yes. Face it. That's correct. But what I did then was I just dug in my heels, further, and I was like, well, I've, kind of how people do if they're in a bad marriage or they're in a job they hate. They're like, well, I'm going to see this thing out. I chose this for a reason. I'm not going to admit I made a mistake. Like, I'm not going to let my ego take that hit. I'm not going to face the fact that I've fucked up, and now it's time to pay the piper. Like, I can't handle that, like, I can't accept that I was that, I don't know what, that easy to manipulate, that easy to get one on over or whatever, or however you say that, like, get something over, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to admit that you're fooled, you were taken advantage of, like, you were duped, like, you lost. It's like, it's harder to just accept that. So you're like, no, I did this for a reason. I know what I'm doing. You don't know what you're doing. I know what I'm doing. Okay, you win. Now you're gonna just keep racking up more shitty years. Good job. That's what people do. People do that rather than say, I made the wrong choice, or I didn't know what I was doing, or, I fell for something I shouldn't have, like, people would rather just be like, I'm going to just keep going, and this is all going to turn around. There's going to be a payoff. Like, I didn't do all this for nothing. Everybody wants some payoff for real shitty stuff in their life. They want to just be like, oh, I just have a shitty life. They want it to be like, okay, well, yeah, I hate my job, but, I'm going to get this promotion. I'm going to get this pay raise. So it's, it's going to be worth it. It's like people will believe anything. That's why cults work. Because literally people are happier sometimes fooling themselves and being their own worst enemy. Like, people will actually go for that shit because people can't face the reality, because the truth is life is actually really hard and we only get one life. So it's like, it's a lot to accept all that, and you gotta accept that, kind of a shipwreck what you've been doing. It's like, it's too much. So there's people like this who will come in and exploit that shit, you know? They're like, oh, this person looks like they are easily led to make not well thought out choices and just, you know, lie to themselves to keep it kosher. So it's like, that's the kind of person we're looking for. Like, this is like perfect. Absolutely perfect. Right? So, yeah. And that's honestly how a lot of horrendous stuff keeps going on in life. Like, literally, there are people, you know, waiting, you know, behind the curtains, is watching you perform, just waiting for people like you, you know. I know, because I've been those people performing and just not realizing that, you know, I was next up on somebody's menu list, you know, like, eaten alive. Anyway, so what else do these people do that makes them so powerful? I would say, like, there's a legend, a German folktale called the Pied Piper, and they're kind of like a Pied Piper. Pied Piper, the legend or folktale was that in the 13th century in Germany, it was the Black Plague, the bubonic plague. And basically it was like a rat infestation. And it made everybody sick and they were all dying, right? Or getting diseased. So this guy comes in and he has this magical flute or something, or instrument of some kind, musical instrument, and he plays these songs, and it's this one town in Germany. Some starts with an H, Holdrum or something. Anyway, he plays his instrument, and all the rats follow him, and he leads them to the water, and they all drown. So then the villagers are like, you know, thrilled, you know, he's solved their crises. Well, they're supposed to pay him, but the town lied. They didn't have the money to pay him, you know, because they've been spending all the money on, like, cures that weren't working and trying to, you know, they were all, you know, in dire need. So the money of the town was non-existent, but they lied to him because he said he would get rid of the rats. Well, so he gets so angry at them that he starts playing his instrument again when all the parents are asleep, and he lures 130 children out playing his like supernatural flute or whatever, and he takes them, they follow him, and he just takes them away. Like, it doesn't say where he takes them, but they're never seen again. And so the whole thing about the Pied Piper is, some legends say he was a devil, others say he was a bugbear, which, what is that? It is something that, what is this? Oh, a hobgoblin. A pest or a pet peeve or irrational cause of fear. Like the boogeyman under your bed. That's what he is. So, like, there were all these rumors that he was supernatural, but, like, from the dark side. That's why he was able to do what he did, because he wasn't even human. So anyway, that's like a metaphor kind of for cult leaders, I guess. I'll make another video where I go through each of These are the cults. I'm just going to talk about this one. But the other thing that's misunderstood about cults is that they usually do like kind of a slow burn where it's like they slowly indoctrinate you. So it's over a period of time, and it's when you're separated from your old life, so you're rapidly absorbing this new life, right? But they don't, I mean, it's not like you get there, it's not like prison, it's not like you get there, they take away all your rights and you can't do this or that, and they're real blatant and obvious about it. That's not how it goes. They do it over a long period of time, and they do a little bit slowly, and then they'll have people they've already done this to then be in charge of you, or be your not your supervisor, but you know what I mean, your mentor person or whatever, roommate, or like they'll do these things, they'll slowly do these things. So it's like piece by piece, little freedom stripped by little freedom stripped, and it's just like, while you're also on drugs and having a bunch of random sex, and having emotional attachments to all these people. It's just like a mess. And that's what they want it to be, Probably the most cults in America have been in Nevada, New Mexico, California. There's, I think I said in one of my other videos, there's 3,000 to 5,000 cults in the last 10 years. That's about how they've measured it. Let's see if I missed anything. There's the types of cults are usually religious-based, doomsday cults, political cults, personality cults, which is like what I said, the charisma of the leader, and he could be prolificating. Oh, I finally got that word right. Prolificating about something that you don't even care about, but because he's so magnetic and charming and, attractive or whatever they are, you suddenly you care about this thing you never cared about before. You know what I'm saying? It's like if Joe Schmo down the street was telling you the same thing, you'd be like, okay, I'm totally uninterested in this. I'm going to make an excuse and get out of this conversation. But it's like they have a hold on, they're deeply skilled in what they do. Like they're like professional grifter con artists. I mean, like, this is like their calling, right? I mean, that's what they're good at. And they usually been doing it in their past lives. I mean, pre-cult days, not past lives, and in like other lifetimes. They've been doing this stuff their whole, they've been building up this skill, and that usually, they were raised by people, I don't know, either narcissistic or, people are religious fanatics. They've almost been groomed themselves in this, and so then they're just, keep it going. And, there's usually a personality disorders involved. Not always, but often. See if I'm missing anything. They're almost like shapeshifters, and like whenever they see like maybe what they're talking about or what they're focusing on, maybe it's not as appealing or magnetizing as what they were doing before. Like they'll shift, like they'll do they're just very perfect at pattern recognition and understanding people, and they have like an innate ability to like flip the sail and go in a different direction of the wind. Like they just have an innate sense of human psychology, really. And they don't have shame, they don't have guilt, they don't have any moral compass, and they're gonna break your moral compass. You can't have morals and be in a cult. That's like too much individual. That would be an individuation, as Carl Jung would say. And that's not groupthink, so that's not going to work. And they always flower everything with this new age talk, or like if they're an alien cult or UFO cult, There's a famous UFO cult. This woman was like, I'll have to get the details of it, but I was listening to a podcast about it. It's fascinating, where she like basically convinced all these people to leave their lives, lose all their money, all of this, because a UFO was going to come and collect them on a certain day at a certain time. And it's like, all these people believed, like thousands of people. And then, lo and behold, the day came and no UFO, and then she came up with some BS that, like, of course they all did something that turned away the UFO, like, energetically, some BS, but the same thing, the same principle I talked about, is instead of the people getting mad at her, it's like they're so ashamed of themselves that they let themselves lose everything they had, give all their money to this person, and it's like the thing isn't happening, that they would rather just let it go than like address it, because it's like too humiliating to them personally. That's just my point. All right, I can't read any of my own handwriting at all, so I think I'm going to stop here. And I did want to talk about Patty Hearst and some of the other specific cults, like the Sudanese Liberation Army, the Manson family cult, Heaven's Gate, like the UFO devotees, which I was just talking about. And I want to talk more about this one lady, Margaret Singer, who had done all this. She's a degree in research in the cult. And she did something fascinating when she studied Korean and Vietnamese prisoners of war and soldiers, and then she was able to find out from them like brainwashing techniques that they were put through, and then she compared them to like stuff these different cults did, and it was surprisingly similar. All right, well, and then maybe, I'll do the breakdown of the particular leaders and cults on the next one. I think this stuff is fascinating, but I love human psychology, so. Obviously, when people try to leave these groups, there's a lot of loneliness, and they all have PTSD, and, like, it's a mess. And their identity is fragmented. Sometimes these groups will get into past life regression and tell them that they did such and such in their past lives and this is their payback. Like they'll just do anything to fracture the center of their mind. They have to tear them down to recreate them into something that can serve them. They're basically become emotional servants to these people, is what they are. And so they can exploit them physically and materially. And like that one, I was talking about how that lady interviewed that one ex-cult leader. Do you know, like, he confessed to her at the end of the interview that, like, he missed it. Like, he was so lonely. Like, he can't manipulate and exploit vast amounts of people and sexually use them as, like, he's unhappy. It's like, okay, that's what we're dealing with. highly disturbed people who get off on disturbing other people. So that's cults for you. All right, I'm gonna stop here. Okay.